Alcahest is a top-down action RPG developed by the creators of the Kirby games and sees you playing as Alan, a young knight as you venture into the world to stop the growing threat of an emperor who's determined to revive an ancient demon to aid him in his conquest. Armed with your sword and shield, you'll encounter a range of different enemies, uncover magical secrets, and recruit valuable allies across 8 distinct stages. Of course, you have a wealth of power-ups to help you succeed, as well as 4 different swords that each come with their own special move that are earned after taking down one of the many different bosses throughout the game. These can be performed by simply holding down the attack button, and once the special meter is full, you can unleash them to devastating results. At times, the screen can be littered with enemies, making it crucial to rely on these abilities to maintain your position and continue fighting. As previously mentioned, allies also play a significant role, and in most stages you'll encounter one of 5 distinct NPCs that fight alongside you. These allies possess their own regular attacks that complement your moves, and each has a unique special attack as well that can be utilized by expending SP. Now, there is an experience system in the game, but instead of the traditional style that sees you leveling up and improving your character, the experience points you get from defeating enemies add up to continues that let you pick up right where you left off should you fall in battle. Although you can't directly improve your health, you can collect one of the numerous secret items scattered throughout each level, and since the bosses can take you out in 1 or 2 hits, it's a good idea to seek them out as you advance. Overall, despite not being the best action RPG on the Super Nintendo, it is undoubtedly worth playing. Growth or Devolution, otherwise simply known as God, is an RPG that released just as the 16-bit era was giving way to the Nintendo 64 that blended traditional RPG mechanics with a sci-fi premise. Taking on the role of Jen, it employs the tried and tested trope of waking up with amnesia, but sets itself apart with its world being loosely modelled on real life, which sees you visiting cities like New York and Tokyo as your quest spirals into a battle against an invasion of aliens, hell-bent on claiming the Earth as their own. When you're not exploring one of the game's many different locations, you'll find yourself in battle, and it's a classic turn-based affair, pitting your up to 4 characters against aliens, mutants, and human foes, where you're free to select from one of many different actions, may that be attacking, using spells, defending, or consuming items, with each battle unfolding in an over-the-shoulder view. What elevates the combat though is something known as the chakra system, that's tied to several stones you'll find throughout the world. Each time you find one, you can unlock an additional level of this power, which can be added to specific moves that increase their potency and their overall effectiveness in battle. Growth or Devolution is a truly ambitious RPG, with its combat and world-spanning quest offering enough novelty to stand out, but its sluggish pace and uneven storytelling hold it back from reaching the same heights of many of the other RPGs you can find on the system. That being said, it's still a great adventure, and for fans of obscure RPGs, it's a rewarding dive into the final days of the Super Nintendo, but more casual players might not be able to stick it out. Front Mission Gun Hazard is essentially a side-scrolling platformer that places a significant emphasis on role-playing elements. It was released towards the end of the Super Nintendo's lifespan and never left Japan, and that's likely one of the reasons it never gained popularity in the West, and it's truly a shame because it would have undoubtedly become a classic. Now, the game is all set in the future and follows the story of a soldier who's tasked with acting as the president's bodyguard and assisting him in escaping the country after it's been taken over by a rogue group known only as the Society. As with many Front Mission games, the plot is filled with political intrigue, betrayal, and moral ambiguity, which soon becomes one of the game's most compelling aspects. In terms of gameplay, it feels like a spiritual successor to Cybernator, another Super Nintendo game from the same developers, and sees you controlling a Wanzer or mech as you navigate a series of stages filled with enemies, platforming, and huge bosses that pose a real threat. As you would expect, you've got a range of weapons to help get the job done, from machine guns to lasers and grenades that all have a role to play on the battlefield. But what helps set it apart from other action games is the depth of its RPG mechanics, and between missions you can customize your mech with new parts, tweaking its armor, speed, and firepower to suit your own approach to the game. The more you use a specific weapon, the more powerful it becomes, and by taking out enemies you'll earn experience which can be used to buy these new items. It turns out to be a really great system that promotes experimentation and exploring each level to uncover each and every secret it holds. For fans of mech games or other action RPGs, this is a must play. Cyber Knight 2 is a tactical RPG that picks up right where the original left off and focuses on the crew of a ship known as the Swordfish as they return to Earth. Upon their arrival, they are imprisoned by an ambitious general who's looking to build self-replicating war machines from the data that was gathered during the events of the first game. Managing to eventually escape, the crew form an alliance with the Resistance and travel the galaxy to gather allies and devise a plan to take Earth back. Now, much of the game takes place in a top-down view for movement on planets and areas, a side view for combat sequences, and a first-person menu system when aboard your ship, where you're free to plot a course to one of the many different planets. Of course, there's plenty of threats that await your arrival, and this is where combat comes into full swing, which all takes place on a grid and plays out in a turn-based fashion, where 3 of your robots, or modules as they're called in the game, can be positioned in relation to the enemies in order to attack. You've got a variety of ways to do so, from melee to long-ranged abilities, with each of your modules being able to be upgraded throughout the course of the game, but instead of simply just buying new items, you craft new gear from enemy scraps in your ship's lab. And when compared to the first game, the system is a lot more streamlined and easy to wrap your head around, making customization one of the main aspects of the game. Overall, it's a sequel that polishes the edges of its predecessor while doubling down on what made it so unique, with its sci-fi premise, deep customization and tactical combat that make it one of the Super Nintendo's best hidden gems. Action RPGs were a dime a dozen on the Super Nintendo, and NX shined as one of the companies specializing in the genre with many popular hits, but Brainlord stands out as a notable exception that largely remained unnoticed and failed to receive the recognition it rightfully deserved. In the role of Rima, the son of a dragon warrior who mysteriously vanished many years before the events of the game, you embark on a quest to uncover the fate of your father and ultimately purge the land of the evil that's slowly been consuming it. While the narrative serves the action well, it lacks depth and substance, but fortunately the gameplay more than compensates for the shortcomings of the story. It closely resembles the early Zelda games, presenting the action from a top-down perspective and Rima utilizing a diverse range of weapons, including swords, axes, boomerangs and spears, as well as a shield that can only withstand a limited number of hits before requiring a replacement. Getting one is easy, as upon defeating an enemy they drop a specific amount of points that serve as currency for purchasing various weapons, armor and items, each with their own unique advantages. Now, as a dragon warrior, you've also got the ability to wield magic, which comes in several different forms, but the game's most compelling aspect is the Jade system, that sees you being able to spawn small monsters that fight along your side or provide different benefits such as healing or a life boost. While it may not be considered as one of NX's finest games, it does offer a competent adventure for players to embark on. Therefore, if you're seeking a new action RPG to explore on the Super Nintendo, I highly recommend giving Brainlord a try. Prior to its merger with Square, NX was renowned for its Dragon Quest series and numerous contributions to the RPG genre, and one of the best examples is RoboTrack, which follows the simple story of a gifted child who confronts an army of robots by constructing his own. The game's storytelling is characterized by its light-hearted nature and comedic tone, which contributes significantly to its upbeat personality and makes playing through it and meeting its wealth of characters all the more enjoyable. Now, the premise of creating your own robots is at the center of the game, giving you up to 3 which can be fully customized when it comes to stats such as health, strength and defense, but it goes much deeper and, like many RPGs, allows you to equip them with a range of different weapons and armor such as swords and hammers to missiles and guns, which all have their own effect in each fight. Once in battle, the game shifts to a grid-like battlefield where your robot can move freely within a turn-based framework governed by an ATB style gauge. As the bar fills, you can position your robot and choose from a range of different attacks based on the gear you've equipped. The simplicity keeps it accessible, fitting for the game's kid-friendly tone, but it does lack the depth that many fans of the genre will be used to. It does attempt to at least mix it up a bit in the form of the bonus system that sees you being able to net larger amounts of experience points should you manage to defeat the enemy quickly or favour melee over ranged attacks. All in all, it's not exactly the most challenging game out there, but thanks to its overall charm and focus on customization, it's definitely worth giving a go. Treasure Hunter G was the last game to be published by Square on the Super Nintendo, and it felt like a true culmination of everything they'd learnt along the way. It focuses on two brothers who are searching for their father, who get roped into saving the world after a villain known as the Dark King is mistakenly released from its prison. As with most RPGs, the game splits its time between top-down exploration and turn-based battles, with the world feeling familiar to Square's other hits like Chrono Trigger, with vibrant towns, forests and dungeons to explore. The real meat of the game though lies in the battle system, with each character's turn allowing you to move, attack or use items and spells, which are all governed by a pool of AP that varies based on your proximity to the enemies. The zones around them can overlap, making multiple enemies even more difficult to defeat, but as you take them out they disappear, so the battle gets progressively easier. Nevertheless, strategic thinking is essential, especially in the more difficult encounters throughout the game. Enemies have elemental vulnerabilities, and the path to victory frequently involves exploiting these weaknesses. Alternatively, you can exert control over battles by strategically placing traps for them and taking caution to avoid triggering them yourself or employing weapons that propel them backwards. With all of these mechanics in play, the battles are some of the best and most engaging moments throughout the game, and whilst it's not perfect, with a fair few pacing issues and a somewhat forgettable story, it's still a solid tactical RPG that's worth your time. So if you're on the hunt for an old school RPG to jump into on the Super Nintendo, Treasure Hunter G is definitely one to look at. Dragon Ball Z stands as one of the longest running anime series of all time, amassing an unprecedented level of popularity over the years that has propelled it into various media formats. This enduring success has resulted in numerous video game adaptations spanning from the NES era to the present day, and a notable example is Super Saiyan Legend for the Super Nintendo, which captures the spirit of the series perfectly. It immerses players into the role of Goku, following the events of the show as they engage in battles against formidable enemies threatening the planet, and you'll be unlocking new abilities, teaming up with allies and ultimately attaining the power of a Super Saiyan to confront the formidable Frieza. And in terms of gameplay, it adheres to the conventions of RPGs, featuring a balanced mix of exploring the vast world filled with dungeons and towns with turn-based battles. While some players may find the combat a bit tedious due to each encounter lasting a lot longer than you'd expect, there is enough nuance in the systems to keep it interesting. When in battle, players are issued a hand of cards, with each card representing a certain action and being governed by an attack or defense rating. Each character responds differently to different cards, varying from basic melee attacks to more powerful special moves, and the effectiveness is determined by the attack rating combined with your character's power level. Due to the setup, the strategy involved is off the charts, as you need to decide when to play your hand or when to conserve them for major battles. Overall, Super Saiyan Legend is undoubtedly one of the most exceptional games released within the franchise, and while certain elements may deter more casual players from fully enjoying it, I strongly recommend that you still consider checking it out. Dark Half is one of the Super Nintendo's most overlooked games that splits the adventure into two equal parts and sees you playing as both the hero and villain at the same time. While they're generally heading towards a common conclusion, their individual paths to getting there are entirely different. The character of Ruki sees you roaming an isometric world, slaughtering villagers to harvest their souls, with your strength growing with each life you take. But a relentless timer ticks down, pressuring you to act fast or recruit monsters to bolster your ranks. Humanity's savior Falco, by contrast, is more traditional, that sees you exploring dungeons, solving puzzles and battling enemies, all in the hopes of saving the human race. You switch between both of them at the end of each chapter, and you get to see the consequences of your actions. That adds a really unique spin on the usual RPG formula. But where it's more traditional is when it comes to combat. The battles themselves are both turn and grid based, where the positioning of your characters is the highest priority. Each of your attacks have a certain range and are limited to different directions, which demands that you maneuver your team to exploit the enemy's position or to avoid retaliation from their attacks. The real hook of the game though lies in the unique mechanics for each protagonist, with Ruki's soul devouring serving as both currency and fuel for devastating attacks in battle, where the heroic Falco relies on a fixed party of characters, and instead of using magic points to perform spells, you've got to consume specific items such as herbs or gems that turns the inventory system into a strategic puzzle. Overall, Dark Half is a truly unique RPG, but it may not be for everyone due to many of its archaic aspects. However, for those seeking something different from the norm, it is definitely worth trying out. Slayers is an RPG that's based on an anime of the same name and focuses on Lena, a sorceress who finds herself waking up in her village after being saved by a stranger with no memory of her former self. In true RPG fashion, it sees you going on a journey to reclaim your past that captures the blend of comedy and adventure that the series is well known for. Gameplay sees you exploring the kingdom and coming into contact with a cast of lovable NPCs that add a huge amount of personality to the game, which is all viewed from the standard top-down perspective where you'll be looting chests, buying gear at shops and running into enemies out in the field. The best way to describe the battles is that it's very similar to the likes of the early Phantasy Star games, with them all being viewed in first person as you pitch your party against foes with a mix of physical attacks and spells. Lena's spell casting is tied to the recovery of her memories, which forms the backbone of the strategy in each fight, and early on there's plenty of limitations placed on the player, but as you advance and regain your past, more and more options soon open up, allowing you to experiment with various approaches to one of the many different enemies that you'll encounter throughout the adventure. Visually, Slayers is serviceable and isn't exactly the best when it comes to presentation, but during battle it fares far better, with huge colourful sprite designs and spell effects that more than make up for the somewhat simplistic approach to the world itself. When it comes down to it, Slayers is a love letter to its source material and delivers a straightforward RPG that banks on charm over innovation and style. It's not a bad thing by any means, especially for fans of the show who will no doubt love it, but newcomers might find it a bit too basic. Well, that does it for another video. Keep an eye out for the next part as that will be coming up soon, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos. You can follow me on all of the socials which are linked below to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Shuden, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jacket Dude, Maximus, Scott, Alfred, Terry, Ryan, Alex, GameCube Galaxy, Curse Salaryman, Fake and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining the Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links down below. As always, thanks for taking the time to check the video out. I'll catch you next time.